Here's how you can achieve Spanish fluency in 2025 without burning out. It starts with the 1,000-word mountain. And I covered that in the previous video, so make sure to watch that one if you haven't seen it yet. We went over what the 1,000-word mountain is, why it's a mountain, why it's 1,000 words, which 1,000 words to learn, and where to find them. But let's be honest, just focusing on the mountain is not the whole picture. 1,000 words is still a lot, and we're talking about the most difficult 1,000 words to learn. And then there's speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So how do you master all of that without burning out? I'm going to show you how conquering this mountain can be a doable, step-by-step process. You can keep that motivation going every day until you've conquered it. So just like we did yesterday, look at this map and picture being lost on an island like this. Imagine that you have this big mountain to try to conquer. This sounds simple, and maybe you're super excited about getting to the top of the mountain, and when you think about reaching the top, that part sounds thrilling. But on the ground, it's a lot of work. You're in a thick jungle, sometimes you have to go around things or climb over difficult obstacles. But imagine, and this is impossible, but imagine if every single step you took on the mountain were exactly as exciting as reaching the top. If every step were that thrilling, of course you'd make it to the top. And it's similar with Spanish. So imagine your vision of achieving fluency in Spanish a year from now. Imagine being able to connect with your Spanish-speaking loved ones on a deep and personal level. And I'm sure you're getting excited by that. That sounds really cool. So next, imagine if that level of excitement toward your dream is what you felt every single day while working on Spanish. Boy, that would be amazing to feel that level of excitement, not just toward your eventual fluency dream, but toward verb conjugations and practicing with flashcards and doing pronunciation drills. If you could do that, you would become fluent in a year. And by the way, if that sounds ridiculous, it is. So nobody is that manically excited about the mundane work of studying Spanish. And in my experience, it sounds even more ridiculous right now because, let's be honest, in the last 20 years or so, it feels like it's gotten harder to do anything consistently. Tech companies are trying to keep you addicted to distracting platforms that give them ad revenue but don't help your life in any way. And the response of some language learning companies is to try to become the same thing. So a lot of language apps are trying to become the next TikTok. So like you log in, you eat a little Spanish lesson like popcorn, you feel your little dopamine hit of accomplishment. So they're acting like 5 minutes of learning Spanish should feel just like 5 minutes of scrolling on TikTok. But real language learning is hard. And motivating yourself to keep learning consistently requires a lot more strategy than just tapping a few times once a day. If you're serious about breaking free from that, if you're serious about achieving your ultimate fluency dreams and doing the real steps that it takes to get there, let's get real and talk about how to do that. To do this, there's a villain that you're going to have to conquer. This is the number one villain of the story that we discovered is holding people back from their goals. It's something you face every day, and it starts with the letter D. So let's see if you can guess what that is. Before I reveal the answer, maybe you've never been able to keep up a streak of serious Spanish learning for more than a week or two. And I'm not talking about tapping on silly little apps. I'm talking about serious learning. Maybe at some point you tried putting the apps away and you tried initiating a morning study routine where you pull out some textbooks and you do some serious work on Spanish. But eventually you didn't feel the excitement toward that you feel toward your ultimate goals. Working without seeing results can be exhausting. It's not always going to be easy, and it might burn you out. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Believe me, I wish I could say that we've always been successful at preventing our coaching students from burning out in the daily work of learning Spanish, but it's not true. And in fact, this is a serious problem that we had 2 years ago, and I'm going to tell you how we fixed it. In 2022, we had a problem. Our students were getting mixed results. Now, some of them were having huge success. So they were leaving testimonials in fluent Spanish, doing interviews in unscripted Spanish, but others were crashing and burning. In fact, many of our students became overwhelmed with the project of learning Spanish once they realized how serious it was because we were pointing them to the mountain. And they were trying to conquer the mountain, but pretty quickly they felt like they just didn't have what it took. They would crash and burn, sometimes in just a few weeks. In fact, we ran the numbers, and our average student at the time lasted for only 2.5 months. That is really discouraging. So again, we did have some success stories, and we were very happy to brag about those students. But what about everyone else? It's really demotivating to see students crashing and burning day after day. A typical example is I would talk to a new student who is really excited about their goals. They would get into our coaching program, and then in a few weeks, I'd receive an email saying, "Hey, I just don't have time for this. I'm completely burnt out." And it wasn't like I couldn't relate to it. So I remember in the early days when I started learning Spanish, anytime I realized there was some area of my learning that maybe I was neglecting, I would kind of get really discouraged. I would be like, wait a second, oh no, I haven't been conjugating that one verb in weeks. What else am I neglecting? Or like, oh no, some of my friends are watching TV in Spanish and I'm not doing that, so maybe what else am I missing out on? This kind of thing would overwhelm me, and instead of being excited about how many different things I could do in Spanish, I would actually get discouraged and burn out. If you feel like you're caught in a web of decision-making with all the different ways that you could try to practice Spanish, that you could study Spanish, what is going to win the decision-making? And I mean this as a real question. See if you can guess the answer. So let's say you're trying to decide between 20 different things. You're being pulled in 20 different directions on things you could be doing in Spanish. And let's say you're exhausted. You don't know which of the things you should be doing. So which one is going to win? The answer is what's going to win is probably the thing that requires the least effort. And most likely that's something small and distracting, maybe jumping on social media instead of studying Spanish. And that's actually how we cracked this. So what occurred to us was the reason that students were burning out was just because they had to make decisions. So decisions are the villain of this story. On any given day that they didn't know what to do, they were going to be in danger of making the wrong decision and burning out and losing their progress. So we made a deliberate choice in 2022. At the time, we were about to roll out a rebrand. So as a lot of you know, we rebranded to LearnCraft Spanish 2 years ago. And we decided that along with the rebrand, it was time to create something nobody had ever made before. Not just a general curriculum, but a daily, granular, doable lesson plan that covers 85% of the Spanish language, but in such small pieces that our students wouldn't have to make decisions. They could just open up the checklist of what to do any day and just do it and go from 0 to 85% and conquer those 1,000 words. Now, this took a lot of work. It took my team collaborating for over a year to redo our curriculum step by step by the end of 2023. And then beyond that, we spent all of 2024 working with a cohort of students to give them even more support, to make the step-by-step plan even better, and to ensure that our students know that we have their back at every step. So at any given moment, our students don't have to figure out what to do next. Based on a combination of what the program tells them to do and their own strengths and weaknesses, which we're logging for them, they know exactly what to work on every day. The good news is that this whole plan worked. So now that we've made the changes, our students last for 6 months on average instead of 2.5 months. In fact, we almost never see students burn out anymore because they're overwhelmed or because of the decision making. Instead, if students do quit early, it's typically because of life circumstances like having a baby or something like that. And this has been an incredible gift for the students, so they feel a really strong sense of self-efficacy. They feel more strongly than ever that they have more control over their learning, even though paradoxically they have fewer decisions of what to do. They know they can accomplish it because they know that with each thing they're doing, they're making tangible progress. Here are a couple of lessons that you can take from this, even if you aren't one of our coaching students. So first, make sure your own study plan is as straightforward as possible every day. For example, the LearnCraft Spanish podcast has lessons that are designed to be taken day after day. If you're not being held accountable by a Spanish coach, you can hold yourself accountable to the LearnCraft Spanish podcast for free. Second, besides going through the daily lessons, There's supplementary work you'll have to do every day to practice your Spanish skills, like going through flashcards, speaking Spanish out loud with audio quizzes, writing in Spanish, drilling yourself on your current weakest areas in Spanish. What we've found is the best way to do that is to find a consistent time every day to do this work, right after something else that you already do consistently. I got this tip from the book Atomic Habits, and it's helped hundreds of our coaching students. For example, maybe you choose to study Spanish right after you brush your teeth, or right after you pour yourself your first cup of coffee. This will hold you accountable to doing a little Spanish routine consistently. And even if you only have about 10 minutes some days, that consistency is infinitely better than nothing. Creating consistent habits like this has proven to keep our students moving reliably toward their goals more consistently than ever before. And sure, it's not exactly like every step you're taking on the mountain feels as thrilling as reaching the peak, but at least you're not lost in the jungle. You know that every single day you're doing the exact right thing that you need to do to accomplish your fluency dreams. If you're not convinced that you really need a daily, step-by-step protocol, let's look at what Jonathan had to say. He's one of our 12-month students wrapping up right now. Jonathan lives in South Texas. He's surrounded by Spanish speakers, and he's kind of an extrovert. He likes to talk to strangers and has always wished that he was able to communicate with the people around him in their own language. This is particularly true in his work. So he's in residential construction, and a lot of the people he works with speak practically no English, both the builders and a large number of the clients. Speaking Spanish would transform Jonathan's ability to be himself in both his personal and professional life around people who don't speak English. Jonathan explored how many courses there are online, and he's kind of a no-nonsense guy. He was tired of chasing down course after course just to be teased with a few lessons that didn't end up going anywhere. He wanted something that was straightforward and step-by-step, and that would get him from point A to point Z. When he found the LearnCraft Spanish podcast, he realized that that was his plan, and he actually upgraded to a 12-month coaching program with us. This level of rigorous structure and accountability is exactly what he wanted. He says, LearnCraft Spanish has a very efficient structure to the course. It's carved out in 5-day segments. Every day has its list of things to do. It's idiot-proof. Then it's up to the student to succeed or fail. He talks about having a rigid, structured format that all you have to do is jump in, invest in yourself, and follow. And the success will come so long as you, the student, are serious about it, willing to put in the work. You can learn Spanish with this course. The structure was laid out in an easy-to-follow format that creates an urge to get my Spanish studying and activities done each day in ways that are rewarding and enjoyable. There's a collection of tasks to complete each weekday, including speaking, reading, and writing in differing amounts according to each individual lesson, all of which create an interesting learning session while staving off learner fatigue simultaneously. I believe that long journeys consist of tiny individual steps, and my focus was to keep taking those steps each day and consistently. I experienced results after each lesson as my Spanish skills continued to grow daily. And those results are super clear for Jonathan now. His Spanish has completely transformed. He says, I'm not afraid to have conversations with folks around here in Spanish. My hesitancy to try and speak Spanish or get involved in a conversation with someone who does speak Spanish is gone. Jonathan told me that he now walks up to people and starts conversations in Spanish all the time, and instead of being stuck with a few regional phrases, which is where he was a year ago, he can now have full conversations thanks to all of this step-by-step work. It was similar for Ryan. So Ryan is another student in our 12-month cohort this year. He's a law enforcement officer and works the midnight shift, so he helps people navigate emergency situations on a personal level. But many of the people he serves speak only Spanish, not English. And Ryan is the only officer in his area who could step up and help victims communicate their needs on a genuine level in their own language. But Ryan's need to learn Spanish goes even deeper. About 3 years ago, he went to Panama and met the love of his life there. She doesn't speak English very well, so he took up the task of learning as much Spanish as he could. At first, he tried using apps and a bunch of textbooks, but like most learners, Ryan found that doing all this work without seeing results was exhausting. But the work became less exhausting and surprisingly fun when he started using our step-by-step system. Ryan says, "I'm not like one of those nerdy people who are like, learning is so much fun. But as I was going along with the program and working with my coach, I was starting to have fun and have those eureka moments, like, oh wow, I can't believe I guessed that. It was cool to actually feel like these things are sticking with me." Now, after about 10 months in the program, Ryan is able to have much deeper conversations with the people he serves, like crime victims. That's compared with a year ago when he was stuck using scripted phrases. And he's now able to connect on a more personal level with his now fiancée about deeper things in Spanish. Can you imagine if this was you? Not just being excited about bonding with your Spanish-speaking loved ones in Spanish someday, but actually turning that excitement into a day-by-day plan until it's reality. A couple more quotes from our students here about feeling excitement instead of overwhelm and burnout. Alicia says, 10 months in, "This work is so rewarding. I would do it again in a heartbeat." Christine has this kind of almost harsh thing to say. "Do you want to watch Netflix and be on TikTok? Or do you want to grow? I am motivated by deadlines and strive to meet expectations. So having classes at set times and expectations pushed me to keep up even when it was hard. I think most people are generally motivated by deadlines and will stick to that better than saying they'll do it on their own. Perhaps some people can be that dedicated, but language learning is tough, so this helps me a lot." So to sum up this lesson, you should reduce decision-making as much as possible. First, make your learning as step-by-step as you can. For example, use the LearnCraft Spanish podcast and just devote yourself to doing a lesson every day. And then make your study routine as consistent as possible, ideally by doing it at the same time and place every day. Okay, so in these last two videos, we've covered 2/3 of how you can become fluent in Spanish in 2025. We talked about why you should focus exclusively on the top 1,000 words in Spanish, and we talked about breaking it down into a doable step-by-step protocol. But there's one thing missing. I'm guessing your goal is not just to have some basic Spanish competency, but to express yourself in Spanish. You want to bond with the Spanish speakers in your life on a deep and personal level. And are you going to be able to do this with just the top 1,000 words? In the final video in this series, I'm going to go over how you can be your truest, most authentic self in Spanish without having to go far beyond the top 1,000 words. I'll share a 3-step method for practicing fluent expression on truly any topic in Spanish without straying too far from the mountain. And then, after that 3rd lesson, you'll be truly ready to become fluent in 2025. So make sure to watch the next video. If it's already uploaded now, you should be seeing it next. But if not, just subscribe to this channel and you'll see it when it comes out tomorrow. And then I want to know how I did on my promise. After you've watched all 3 videos, it's the moment of truth. Leave a comment on any of these videos and let me know how convinced you are that you can become fluent in Spanish in 2025. See you in the final video.